Hello.
Hello AOS fans!
It's the Agents of Underworlds.
And in this video we're asking, how many rules would a rule changer change if a rule changer could change rules?
I mean, that's not specifically what we're asking.
No, we were just looking for a snappy title to get into.
Yeah, just to get you all hooked, and hopefully you are. But we want to talk about the rules changes recently, the rules update document that GW are bringing out.
It was going to be hard because right now you're thinking of woodchucks.
I'm always thinking of woodchucks though. Now, back when this game first started, many moons ago, after a very relatively short period of time, GW realised actually there's loads of really good cards and loads of really rubbish cards, and everyone takes all the really good cards, and they created what they called at the time a bar list, which was banned and restricted, and then it changed to a far list later on, which was the Forsaken and restricted, but did the same thing. It was basically a list of cards that were all the best ones, and you could only take at 1.5 of them, and then as time went on,
Very quickly.
yeah, very quickly in fact, down to 3 of them. And as seasons rotated and cards came and went, they added more and they took out, and that list expanded and expanded.
And generally it worked pretty well, I think. There was occasionally some wailing and gnashing of teeth, and sometimes the timing of it was a bit iffy, but as a way of keeping the game balanced, it worked pretty effectively.
And then Nemesis came along, which I think was at a very crucial point in the game. GW sort of pivoted on their axis a bit, and they created this new Nemesis format where you take a warband and you take a rivals deck and you mush it together, and you've only got 60 cards to pick from, and that kind of did away with the need for a far list.
Yeah, it was deck building without the card chasing, and because there were smaller card pool that you could pick from, they felt that they didn't need to restrict stuff, and also it was meant to be like the ultimate way to pick up the game really quickly beyond rivals. And so they didn't want to complicate things by saying, oh, well, you can take these 2 decks, but actually you can't only take 2 of the cards, or rather you can't take those 2 cards, but you can take these ones, and trying to keep it simple. So now we've had 2 solid years of Nemesis, and that really has become the established competitive way to play. All GW events are that way, and all of the best Agents of Sigmar events are that format too.
And as a result of that, we now have a rules update document that's 8 pages long, 8 sides of A4 paper in not exactly very large font, very closely put together.
Yeah, I suppose that's an unintended consequence of dropping the far list, but still needing to balance the game.
Yeah, they've obviously come up with a lot of situations where they realised, oh, this warband is actually a bit too good, FLM, and we need to maybe nerf it a bit, or actually this warband's not as good as we would have liked, we just need to make the fighters a little bit better.
Yeah, so when it first started, it was kind of like really much centred on erratering the fighter cards. So I think like Kagha's Ravager's got a bit of a change, and just to make them, to lift them up. Yeah. But now we've started to see quite heavily editing actual cards in the game. Yeah. And it's starting, like you say, 8 pages, it's starting to get a bit of a headache, I think, and a less elegant solution. The far solution was very elegant. This feels a lot less elegant to me. Yes,
now they can get much more detailed with this way of fix it, because they can go, well, actually, instead of that fighter's range attack being 4, it's 3. Or instead of that having Grievous, it doesn't have Grievous. They can micromanage the warbands.
Or they've taken some cards from hybrid cards to dual cards, I think, whichever way around it is. It makes them much harder to score without substantially changing the text, which I think is quite nice, but it's just how you disseminate that information, and it has to be in this document that you've got to download.
8 pages again.
Exactly. And that 8 pages is only going to grow because, as we know, they never rotate out warbands. Yeah. So every time there's like, because I mean, I don't know how many FLM cards they've changed, but it's probably quite a few. 3 or 4, and even more if you count the fighter cards. Yeah. And the plot card has changed. That is just going to grow and grow if they keep doing that.
We also still have a few more rivals decks to come out before we've reached the full 2-year sort of block. So that's probably going to generate more as well. And we know some of our patrons also have a stream of questions that are going to require further changes as well.
Just the warbands themselves is just going to grow and grow and grow, especially if they keep trying to balance all the different warbands. So this time around, Dagok's got a lift, but FLM got a nerf, and before that, Arena got a lift, Domitan got a nerf, and it just you've got to keep up.
Yeah, there's a lot of pages there. And to add on top of this, a lot of people, you're one of these especially, they like to look through the cards physically to work out what they want to take in their deck, and you just can't do that if you've got an 8-page document that you've got to go back to say, has this card changed every time?
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but I literally just thought, oh, I'm not playing FLM anymore.
Yeah, I've got to that point. I took him to a tournament. I came about 5th or 7th or 9th or whatever it was. And now it's like he's changed too much. I just can't be bothered to try and work that out
Yeah,
anymore.
I just look at it. Well, there's two things. A is I can't be bothered to try and work out what the changes are.
Yep.
B, I don't want to go to a tournament and have to explain that to my opponent.
Yep.
C, I don't want to be the person who the other person sits down against and goes, oh God,
What's happening now?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
So,
And also, when you're in the middle of a game, unless you physically change that card, I would be very likely to go, I've got an or situation. I've done the first one, so I've scored it. But actually, now it's not an or, it's an and I haven't scored it, and I'll forget that at the time, and I'll remember afterwards, and I'll feel bad. And on top of all of this, Nemesis was always meant to be about making it easy for newer entrants to the game. Oh, you really like F-Limbs? Brilliant. Buy the box. Here's your warband. Take out the cards and start playing. We had a club night the other day, and literally when we sat down, the kid who'd come along, he brought Jeepers Wraith Creepers. I was like, they've changed. But I thought, I'm not going to bother now because I can't bother to explain. But at some point, he's going to have to realise, no, that warband's not as good as you
I
thought
was
it
doing
was.
a teaching game with him after you, and I did the same thing. Oh, I won't tell him that they're different.
And to find out that warband that you really love has actually got a lot worse, that's a little bit of a bait and switch, which is a bit unfair, I think, and it's just a feel-bad factor.
Which is a shame, and I just felt that, I think I may have already said this, but I'm going to say it again, the far list was quite an elegant solution.
Yep.
And this just feels a bit, you've got to,
It's a lot to wade through, and it's not even easy to find your warband in there.
No. And the far list, again, things came on, things went off if it turned out not to be as oppressive as they hoped. This, I think they have changed some of the changes. And then you really like, well, now I can't even. So I know they did change it, but now I can't remember what they changed it to and what they've changed it from. So to me, it just everything gets a bit muddled.
Yeah.
Which I don't really like.
So we've said that the far list was a fairly elegant solution. Could we apply the far list now to what we have in Nemesis? Now I know we did a video, or at least we talked quite a lot at one point about saying we don't want a far list in Nemesis, but that was before we got an 8-page document, and we went, maybe we do.
Yeah, I suppose GW are learning that Nemesis was in its infancy then.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like you did need it because you didn't have that many rivals decks to pair it with.
And they've seen a lot more tournaments, so they've seen a lot more of what people are playing, and it becomes rapidly very obvious which warbands are getting a lot of airtime and which ones aren't. So they need to balance that up somehow.
Yeah, but if you do it with a file list, it's still something that new players need to learn about.
Yeah, it definitely still stops newer players being able to just jump straight into the game. It's not if they're playing casually, obviously, but if they want to go to a tournament, that is going to become a thing very quickly for them, and that's going to change things straight away.
Yeah, so that kind of detracts from the ease of entry. You can't improve the fighters or the plot cards if you've done them wrong.
This is true. Yeah,
With
you
the
can't far list F-Lim. You can't have F-Lim anymore.
You file list a plot card. You can't use void cards for a plot card.
Exactly. So yeah, you can't micro manage broken cards as easily that way. It's a bit more heavy-handed. It's just you can't have that card at all, or you can only have 3 of these awesome cards.
Yeah, and that number may need a change for Nemesis. I'm not quite sure because it kind of felt like when it first came out, I used to look, I don't know whether you did, but when I built a Nemesis deck, I used to look to see how many restricted cards it had because it was give you an idea of how strong it was.
And of course, Underworld's DB would tell you. It would go, you've got 5 restricted cards or whatever.
But 5 was quite rare. It was almost never did one get to 3. So I almost wonder if you did have a Nemesis far, whether it would have to be like 2 or 1 card.
And of course, it's also a feel bad factor when you've been told, you just got to put these 2 decks together and you can build your Nemesis deck, and then you go, but you can only have 12 of these cards or something. And it's a bit of a feel bad factor.
Especially with the Forsaken ones, like you literally can't use that card.
You
But it's
can't
the
have
best card. Well, I know.
And that's why we got rid of it. So what other options are there out there that GW could do to improve things?
Yeah, well, first I'm going to go totally off script, and I'm just going to say, I don't think you'll ever totally get rid of rules updates because sometimes they will screw things up.
Yeah.
And they will think, well, we need to change that rule so that it's works or doesn't work or whatever. So that's the first thing. But I do think GW could offer some ways of just making that transition a little bit better, or just to try and make the solution a little bit more elegant, I think.
Yeah. Now there are some completely left field options that you could come up with. GW could offer packs of altered cards every 6 months. They could go, right, here are all the altered cards. We're going to do a card pack for all those and just sell them. Now that pack will get bigger and bigger and bigger over time, or they'd have to keep them in stock for an indefinite period, and we know that never works with GW.
It's never ever going to happen. And basically anything that involves putting extra card stock is never ever going to happen.
So maybe GW could offer us the option to print our own card stock. They could give us the PDFs with the images on, and there are other alternative providers out there that could do it for you.
Yeah, or you could just do it yourself and stick it in the sleeve.
You could.
Yeah.
I don't think GW can do that either, though, because that's like giving away their IP.
I can't see them allowing you to you get it printed via a third party.
No.
But maybe printed for your own use.
I don't see them ever printing it in a PDF though either, because they're literally giving you that. Like they're just like, print our stuff. We don't care. They do care a lot.
They do, yeah.
And of course, there's maybe another fancy option, like they could produce sticker packs of the card changes, so you just stick it over the old one. I mean, aside from horribly
GW are famous for their stickers.
Exactly. I mean, if you really want to come with like ideal solutions here, at least you get to keep your card.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I quite like that solution. I mean, it's used quite a lot in legacy games.
Yeah.
And things like Gloomhaven and stuff to stick over things. I mean, I do like that solution. Again, it's up there with the snowball in hell and all that kind of stuff.
It's probably never going to happen, but there's a solution.
You've written down there gold-plated toilets.
Yeah, flying pigs.
Flying pigs. Is that your obsession, is a gold-plated toilet?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Another alternative is they just don't change anything. They do the usual GW thing, and they just pretend that nothing's wrong, and then they just leave players to, boo the power players who take all the broken decks and warbands at tournaments, and then, we can shun them.
I prefer the current solution.
Yeah, probably. So we did come up with maybe a slightly more realistic approach to how they could do this, and it would mean going back to a file list. But bear with us, we'll try and explain it.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is that it's not going to solve any updates to cards that they need to make to fighter cards.
Yeah, it wouldn't solve plot cards or fight cards.
It can only be your power cards and your objectives.
Yeah.
But you could have a tiered file list.
You could.
And how would that work, Pete?
Well, what you would do is you would obviously come up with a tier list. Everyone loves coming up with tier lists these days, and if anybody can come up with an accurate one, it'd be GW. And what you would do is you would then say, okay, all of the S-tiered warbands, they get 0 FARD cards. They get no FAR cards.
Or maybe 1.
Or maybe 1. Maybe.
But when he says 0, he doesn't mean they don't get any. He means basically they can't take any.
Yes.
So they're not allowed to choose them. But the file list would consist of cards that were universal and from faction cards. So you may have a situation if you did decide that one warband was so oppressive it wasn't allowed to take any FAR cards, basically it wasn't allowed to take any, but then you restricted 3 or 4 of their own cards. They just couldn't take them. So they would be, for all intents and purposes, banned because you couldn't take them, you weren't allowed.
But at some point, if they became less good as a result of that, you could then say, okay, they can take 1 card, and then you give them a little bit of choice back, and then your Chosen Axes and your Gerzags, Iron Skulls, you can take all the FAR. You can take
all the cards.
That way, you'd be able to restrict the overpowered and broken warbands without micromanaging the detail on the cards by just saying, you know what, you've got a whole bunch of awesome cards, or your warband is all absolutely amazing, so therefore you can't have most of them because they're just too good. That would mean you could start to come up with warband or plot card specific errata changes and stuff like that, because there would be less to keep track of.
I think that would be more reasonable. And as a player, obviously we're slightly different because we play all the warbands all the time. But as a player, you tend to focus on a warband, so then you learn what the changes are, and you kind of know that, and you don't need to know. I know you've got your opponent, but you don't need to know quite so much. And I think that's the problem, is trying to keep track of so much when everything's potentially had a change.
Whereas at least if you know that all the cards that are being played with, aside from the fighter cards and their plot card, if all the cards they're playing with are exactly what they say on the card, that's a lot less to have to worry about, because you just know, well, there's 5 really good cards. Eflin can only take 1 of them, or the Null Spirit Pack can only have 1 of them, but if you're playing somebody else, you can take all of them. And then that just means it's a little bit easier for newer players to get their head around as well.
Yeah, I mean, Force of Frost is a classic example there. It would have been far less oppressive if Domitans had only been allowed to take 1 of them, or none of them.
Yeah.
And Eyes of the Nine could take all of them. That would just be, it would be more flexible and better, I think.
But then they changed that card in Force of Frost. Went, oh no, you need an ice token to be able to cast this spell. But it's not on the card, so you're very likely during a game just go, I'm going to cast this spell, boom, done it, loads of you guys are now dead. And completely miss the fact you need that ice token.
And I think they've changed 3 of them now.
So that's what we think. We personally don't want to have to try and remember a whole raft of changes going on across all random decks and warbands that we mainly play once a year. Maybe other people don't mind as much, but what are your solutions and ideas out there?
Yeah, can you think of an elegant solution to solve the balance problem? I guess it's a problem for a lot of games, but people are always trying to search for the best way to balance things. What do you think is the best way to balance Underworlds?
So don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that bell for all of our future content.
And if you would like to, you can support us on Patreon for as little as £2 a month. All the money earned there gets ploughed back into the channel to make better content for you guys.
And don't forget to leave a comment below about what you think about this situation, or if you've got any other things that you'd like to say about Underworlds.
Yeah, we always do our best to answer every comment on every video.
So we'll see you soon, maybe in the Underworlds.